And it's Oisin here from iReach, and I will bring you through our presentation this morning. It's going to take about half an hour, but we're looking at segmentation. We're looking at personas, why and how people build personas, what the benefits are, and why organizations would use them. So let's get started. So hopefully you can all see the screen. Just if you need to increase the size of your window, just on the live storm stream you'll see above the slides an arrow, a right pointing arrow. So if you click on that, that'll hide the chat box. And then if you hit the, I guess it's an arrow that looks like it's pointing up and pointing down at an angle. If you click on that, that should maximize the slides as well. So you should get a good visual in terms of what the slides are. Some of them are a little bit detailed. I'm not going to go through everything in exact detail, but I will give you a good sense as to what we're hoping to achieve in the next 30 minutes. So we're going to look at the definitions and background to segmentation, why we do it. I suppose for most organizations, when you look at marketing spend, it's about really trying to target people that will have the most impact on your brand, be it increased sales, be it revenue, be it customer loyalty or satisfaction. So what we do with segmentation is really break your customer base or your prospects into smaller target groups, and we build personas around that. So we create a visual and a picture as to who those people are, what they have in common, what their interests are. I'm just going to briefly touch on the first of the three briefings in this series, looking at predominantly generations X, Y, and Z, really trying to develop them from what you might call more normal standard demographics into personas, and really starting painting a view on personalities, lifestyles, and hobbies, which allows brands and organizations to be more targeted, be it in a PR campaign, a TV campaign, an advertising campaign, and so on, as well as being a little bit more knowledgeable as to the shared interests and activities, behaviors, and so on of smaller customer groups. So really trying to target the bullseye of people that can have the most impact on growing your business. And then we're going to look at some sample personas, some pen profiles, looking at some interesting differences and commonality across generation X, Y, Z predominantly. I'm going to share some case studies with you of projects we've worked with for the likes of Royal Caribbean, Sky here in Ireland, as well as eBooker. So hopefully you'll find it informative. And then we'll close with some considerations, recommendations, and hopefully we'll have a couple of minutes if any of you want to send a little chat or to send a question in over instant messaging and into the software. Okay. So hopefully you can all hear me, and we'll move on. So just by way of a quick, and it will be a very quick introduction to iReach, how we run such studies like this. We have a panel of about 40,000 consumers in the Irish marketplace. As an aside, we also have specialist panels, which we've tapped into for this particular briefing, which is our youth panel, where we can talk to a robust sample of those who are under the age of 18. We follow ESOMAR best practice, which is an international standards for market research, that we have to engage with those non-adults or those under the age of 18 in quite a different way than we do with our normal panel. So that's where we built a specialist panel. We also have a business panel and some other specialist panels also, which we use for all our qual and quant activities, so surveys, focus groups, and the like. We do a huge amount of research surveys. We run 2 consumer omnibus waves each month, and from that we deliver 1,000 responses on a nationally representative basis of adults in Ireland. So this is a model we use quite a lot for projects like this, where we can actually talk to a wide range of adults. They are nationally represented by age, region, gender, and social class. And what we're doing as part of this series of briefings is really breaking them down into, I suppose, more common terminology that people in marketing are talking about, which are your generations, your generation X, Y, and Z. And we'll just profile those in a couple of moments. And then finally, because we have such large panels, we've built our own communities, and these are groups of people who are likely sharing interests that we can talk to. We have this phrase we call a pop-up panel, so we might talk to 50 people who are interested in particular movies or cars, or are engaging with a particular brand, and we use those to see how they engage with particular ongoing conversations or ongoing activities. So just to have a recap, we wanted just to, I suppose, profile what Generation Z is, because you know, more and more people are talking about generations. They do vary a little bit in terms of what the age of birth is or the coming of age. But in this instance, in terms of Ireland, we're looking at those born between 95 and 2012. And on the right-hand side, you'll see the gender split. So very similar, slightly more males than females in this gender. The rural and town and urban splits. And again, we see quite a high rural perspective compared to towns or urban areas. And then we break it out by gender, urbanites, and where they live in Ireland. So when we look at Generation Z, there's over 500,000 of those in Ireland spread across the country. In this instance, we are only sharing research insights and data of those that are over 18. So we haven't included anyone under the age of 18 in this particular instance, in this particular briefing, but we do have access to those age groups as we've used for other projects. Generation Y, then, we look at those in the age of 25 to 42. This is the one that I suppose has been spoken about most in the last couple of years when we look at millennials in terms of how they're engaging with brands. And it has been, I suppose, for many brand owners, a very important target market of those who are, you know, probably moved through college in their first or second job, sort of well into their career, moving on to the property ladder, probably thinking about children. So again, moving into very serious decision makers in terms of access to spend and access to finances and so on. So we see about just a little bit about over 1.2 million of those, again, heavily urban orientated, where we have nearly 900,000 are based in urban areas and about just under 400,000 in rural areas. And you see the split across the different regions. Generation X, which we've been speaking about for a number of years, those born between 66 and 76. And we see just over 700,000 of those, about 2/3 urban, 1/3 rural. And then finally, we've included boomers in many of our slides, more just to give a full picture, and not that we don't care or not considering boomers, that your older age group, 55 plus. But I think what we see in many of the slides is the key differences are really across X, Y, and Z, those that are coming into many target markets for many brand owners and product owners in the Irish marketplace. So I'm just going to recap, and more just to set the scene. So we presented this data last month, and the recording of this presentation is available. So just let myself or Ryan know it's on a new YouTube channel we set up, which will also include this presentation after today. This is a little bit more on, I suppose, technology, demographics, and you might call it more functional profiling of the different generations. And what you see on the right-hand side is you have all. And then that's representing the ownership of smartphone users, for example. So 91% of the adult population has smartphone users. And if I drop down to the 3 boxes underneath that, highest amongst Generation Z at 98%. I think we all know this is a generation that's growing up with phones, 95% for Generation Y, and then 90% for Generation X. And what you will see is we do include boomers. The data particularly, I'm not going to focus it on too much. The reason being is that many of you who are good at and who consume a lot of market research will know sometimes the all number might seem out of kilter if we don't have the constituent building blocks underneath it. So those of you who know what I'm saying will understand what I mean, but not to worry about it too much. So then we look at, so that's device ownership. Then we looked at how they consume media, particularly in the last presentation, which you will find on our YouTube channel. We were really looking at media, how they consume TV, radio, what they're doing online. But as I said, as part of a building block of profiles or personas, what we do is we're layering different attitudes and different views on data like this. So this is looking at devices in terms of how regularly they listen to car radio, smart TVs, traditional radio, and so on. So I'm going to go through these very quickly, and the full recorded presentation is available, as I said already. And then this is just breaking out social media usage. And the things you see, if I look at Facebook, all adults, 89% are engaging with Facebook. But if I look over at Instagram, 39% of all adults are looking at Instagram. But if I drop down to the numbers underneath it, we see 71% of Generation Z are engaging with Instagram. So we see already many brands, and we're recommending to many brands, particularly if you're talking to younger age groups, you really need to shift focus and shift investment to Instagram as a really important way of engaging with those younger age groups, particularly Generation Z. Snapchat, we know, is hugely popular amongst those younger age groups, and we see 72% of younger age groups are engaging with Snapchat. So we see, even on social media platforms, a significant variance of social media engagement. And then finally, just as a recap to last month, again, we just looked at other content sources as well. So what we're doing today is we're building on top of that, as I said, that more functional profiling to really look at personalities. Now, this is a model we've used for a number of brands. And what we're doing is we're layering personality traits, attitudes, behaviors, lifestyles, and hobbies on top of more traditional demographic data to start building a profile of what these different generations think, how they act, how they react to advertising particularly, but also into sales, shopping, promotions. So I'll bring you through the first example here. So we ask all participants, how would they state that success is important to them? So the all number in gray, 26%. So that's your kind of average across the population. The next one down, Generation Z, we see 47% of those that will state that success is very important to them. So you can see that they're just a little bit under double of those who rate success as important. So the idea with these slides is really just to help you see the dramatic difference in terms of some of these personality traits for the generations we're looking at. 38% Generation Y say success is very important to them, and then Generation X, 24%. And we know some of that's based on where they are in their careers, where they are in their family status, where they are in life stages, but we're just trying to highlight some of those really important differences to them. Obviously, loyalty to brands is hugely important to many people in marketing. And what's interesting on this particular slide is it's quite similar across the different age groups and the different generations, where loyalty remains really strong for brands that engage and connect. The success can be very significant in terms of brand loyalty and retaining brand loyalty. We also know that different age groups can be more fickle and different generations, but certainly the attitudes towards brands is quite similar, which is interesting in its own right. And then when we ask our participants, do they consider themselves a leader, we see the strongest acceptance or agreement with that statement come from Generation Z at 23%. So while it's not a strong trait across all adults, we do see that, and the phrase we use is the Generation Z cohort over-index, or they're above average when we look at all adults on that particular trait. Influencers, and I know we talk a lot on social media about influencers, and we also know that those that feel that they are influencers are also driven by other influencers. So again, we see here personality traits, Generation Z having a stronger or above average state that they believe they are influential to family and friends. So people look to them for guidance, look to them for advice. The lowest, just as an aside, you see with boomers at 21%. So that's what brings the average down to 26. So we can see again a strong standout from Generation Z and some of these key personality traits. Where they differ a little bit here, I like learning about new things. Average is 58%, strongest amongst Generation X and Generation Y, and slightly under average for Generation Z. So as we see the ages evolving through life stages, through getting interests in terms of politics or other activities, their attitudes and their personality traits differ. And this is important for brands depending on how you want to engage, and every brand will have a different sense of what's important to them. If you're in the retail sector and you sell furniture, really having a knowledge if somebody is house proud is hugely important. So we see here Generation Z are the least house proud, and again, understanding their life stages, they're probably coming out of college or still in college, very early in their careers, so the whole house thing hasn't really kicked in yet. And then if we look at the older age groups, obviously being house proud and getting on the property ladder and buying furniture and all that stuff that goes with it is hugely important. So then you see the Generation Z folks massively under indexing the average of everyone else as part of this study. We look at value for money. Again, this is important for many brands who position value, who position quality over price. And we see here reasonably strong and reasonably similar across all the age groups. So the average is 56. Lowest is Generation Z, and we know, again, based on their lifestyles, price is more important than even the brand. The brand itself is as important as price. And for those older age groups, we do get more in tune with, it's not just price. Sometimes it's a better quality product. It'll last longer. So value is important in that instance. Fun is an important trait, and again, particularly if you're in advertising or in creative agency, where many brands want to be a fun brand, a brand that people like, that people can engage with. So fun to be around. 48% of Generation Z feel they're fun to be around, compared to the average of 30%. The Generation Y folks feel they're fun too, and then Generation X are the average, and Boomers are much lower. But again, if your brand is targeting younger age groups and you can create that fun engagement, then again you're doing the right thing in terms of personality traits. I'm a night owl. Again, you see here that younger Generation Z, obviously more energy. They can live with late nights and early starts, and you can see that differs then as we all get older through the different age groups. The final couple of slides here, health conscious. Again, I find this quite interesting, where again 44% are on average feel that they're health conscious. The lowest, just almost half, 24% of Generation Z, and the rest are pretty similar, 41% for X and Y, and Boomers, the ones that are most interested and most concerned about health. So again, it's really interesting if you're in or have clients in the health sector or in the health sector yourselves, where that sits. Foodies, again, a similar trend, where Generation Z are the lowest, Generation Y are the highest. And fashion conscious, which again, it's interesting when we look a couple of slides back that Generation Z are more about price than value, but yet brand is hugely important to that age group. As we know, the brand name, wearing a particular brand is hugely important. So it's more about the value of the brand necessarily than the value of the product, which is quite interesting when we look at the other age groups. Okay, so that's just bringing you to some comparative views on certain statements and attitudes. And now we're looking at social activities and lifestyles. So what we do with persona development is we start layering each of these elements on top of each other. Different brands will have different, I suppose, attitudes to how important some of these are. So this is a fairly generic one we use for some of our own profiling, but each organization would probably ask different questions based on the sector they're in. But we see here just interests in music, again, highest from Generation Z, listening to the news, and the last one, most popular and the most common activity from Boomers. So again, some of these can help really drive engagement in terms of if you're doing a media campaign, what media is going to engage best. And then we talk about meeting new people and having a close circle of friends. So you can see here, some are quite similar in terms of engagement with the different age groups, and some you'll see, like news at the very end, are quite distinctly different. And these are really good learnings to have when you're trying to identify which is the target or the target rich environment, which is the bullseye that your segment or your persona you need to be talking to. And again, it's really important in terms of maximizing marketing spend, brand activities, that you're really engaging with those that will have the most impact on your brand. And it's not just the one-to-many scenario, it's really trying to get to that one-to-one, which is not probable or possible for most brands. So if you can identify that group of people, that group of personas that have a shared interest that you think your brand needs to engage with, well, then it's a really good way to layer that. Always looking good is important to me, again, which might surprise some people, of most interest and strongest description for Boomers at the very top. And then you'll see the rest are quite similar. People looking for things that are a bit different. I'm on the go all day, not dramatically different in some of these activities or lifestyle traits. Again, sometimes it's value over price we look at here. And you'll see, if I can just draw your eyes to the bottom of the page, you'll see the scale there, 0 to 100. So even though Boomers do stand out more in this statement or this description of lifestyles, the percentage is still quite low. And when we look at the bottom one there, I'm an educated and well-informed shopper, people really feel that they know the way around shops, they know the way around being educated in terms of getting value or getting deals based on how they spend. Jumping up to the top, I always compare prices. Again, it's becoming more and more of a driver for many brands, particularly in the retail FMCG space, where price comparison, even in financial services, people want to compare competitive prices across, be it brands, but also across different shops or different labels as well. And then we ask about the paying more for higher quality products. And if I look at Generation Z, again, this really is tying into that brand identity, really feeling that they want a particular brand to wear, and price isn't the issue. And it's all about just owning that particular brand from that younger age group. And I'm going to quickly flash through this, because again, this is going to be relevant or not depending on the type of brand you are. Sports, most interest Generation Y, and we'll see some of the common themes you would have seen already. Lowest interest in sports amongst Generation Z. Exercise training, again, highest amongst Y and X. And again, that will be borne out in terms of other research we do looking at sports and activities. Walking and trekking, more popular amongst those older age groups, Generation X and Boomers. Interest in movies, films, high amongst Generation Y. Music and theatre, highest amongst Boomers. And entertainment and shows, we see really strong interest from that younger Generation Z. And if we were to layer this on top of our social media engagement, or looking at consumption of media, you'll see that the highest consumers of content from YouTube will be Generation Z. The highest consumers from streaming services on phones and iPads will be Generation Z. So this interest in shows will really connect with some of those other profile variables that we capture. So we're not just looking at each of these out of context, we really start building a common set of attributes or hobbies or attitudes that really join these personas or these people together in target groups. Music and concerts, again, we see huge interest in music. And again, we see also, as I mentioned already, in terms of those who most listen to music, again, music streaming services, Spotify, most popular with Generation Z, followed by Generation Y. And then we see here similar trends from concerts, Generation Z and Y also. So again, we see common themes that join particular age groups or related age groups together, and those that separate different age groups. Lowest interest in reading amongst Z and Y, same for horticulture, and then home interior. So again, it's easy to see some of these common life stage attributes where different age groups are just not engaging with particular activities or interests. Foodies here and dining out, again, you see similar themes, but dining out is quite strong. There's not a huge variance in terms of those dining out or interested in dining out as a hobby across all age groups. So that's good if you're in the food or the hospitality sector. And then the final slide, I think, is on travel. Again, older age groups we see here, Boomers, highest level of interest in travel. If you are in the pet business, highest interest in pets and animals from Generation Z, believe it or not. And then I think we see a common theme across family activities, highest amongst Generation X, because they're likely to have younger families. Boomers are probably empty nesters, and then the others are just coming into that life stage. Sorry, this is the final slide, technology and photography. The one that really stand out, and again, you're probably not surprised with technology, highest among Generation Z, but what I think is really interesting, photography, 31%. If we connect that back to Instagram, which is a visual service, it's a visual social media service, which is where the younger age groups, Generation Z particularly, are engaging a lot more. This is directly tied to that, where again, growing up with phones and smart devices all the time, it's natural for them to take photos of everything and anything to share, particularly now on Instagram over other social media services. And you see here reasonably low interest in motors or driving as a hobby. Now, obviously, that would, if I just take a step back, sorry, that would be quite different if we have this by gender. This is just giving you the headlines across the different hobbies or technology areas. that we've captured. But obviously underneath this, when you're looking at personas, you will have gender perspectives as well, and particularly the industry you're in, you might even have regional views also. But this is just a fairly high level view of particular hobbies and interests. So the final section before we show you how personas come together and what they might look like. This is the final couple of slides in terms of profiling information, which is on shopping. And this is, again, really looking at how different age groups engage with shopping. No surprise, younger age groups are more interested in online shopping and more comfortable with online shopping. And obviously the flip side to that, they're slightly lower when we call indexing per retail store. So let me explain where these numbers come from. So what we do with persona development or pen profiles is, rather than showing, let's say, the all number, when we look at the PC there is 57. If I was to use just the percentages, as we have done in previous slides, that's probably about, I don't know, 65, maybe 66% of Generation Z will over-index or above average when it comes to shopping. So what we do is we turn it into an index so we can see which generation over-indexes. So 119 is significantly over-indexing, which Generation Z, and then Boomers 77 under-index. So what we do is we turn 57% into the index, which is the average, and then we compare each individual percentage to that average, and we get an index. So I probably haven't described it very well, but if you see anything over 100, it means it's above average, and if you see anything under 100, it's below average, and we give that a score so you can see if it's strongly above average or strongly below average. So you'll see here online shopping, strongly below average for Boomers and strongly above average for Generation Z. Similar scores in terms of those who want to visit retail, slightly under indexing for Generation Z, slightly over indexing for X and Boomers. But when we look at actually mobile phone, which I think is really interesting, buying via mobile apps, it's actually quite low amongst the Generation Z, which you might think is at odds considering they've grown up with phones. But actually they're incredibly suspicious of a lot of online and phone activities. And also they may not have access to credit cards or debit cards as part of that engagement. So they're likely to be more cash orientated. So, but again, we do see from other studies that they're much more suspicious about purchasing directly with mobile apps, where we see Generation Y being way ahead, way over average, 144, and we see Boomers being massively under average at 39%. And then the last one we look at online and retail. So this is a little bit like you purchase online and you collect in store, or click and collect. So you might purchase online and then you actually then finish the transaction in the store. Hugely popular amongst Generation Y. So they significantly over-index at 124, and across Boomers and Generation Z, they significantly under-index in terms of buying something online or making the purchase online and then collecting in store. So you see some quite interesting trends there. Finally, then we look at brands. Selection of brands are important in terms of shopping, value for money, and then quality of products. So I'm just going to skip through because I'm just conscious of the time. So we take all of this information and we develop what we call pen profiles. So we blend lots of different views, lots of different attitudes, lots of different information, and we do cluster analysis, where we look at the common themes that bring these people together in terms of shared interests, shared beliefs, shared attitudes to maybe shopping or particular engagement with social activity. So each brand will look at what's important to them as part of their pen profile. So this pen profile doesn't fit every brand, doesn't fit every circumstance. This is just a generic profile we use just to really bring a bit of richness to Generation X, Y, and Z, but each brand would analyze and connect the data differently. So what you normally do is you create a number of what we would call clusters or pen profiles. These are groups of people that share a lot of interesting attitudes or attributes or personality traits together that you think are really important for your brand. Important because they're people you need to concentrate on selling to, or important because you feel that these are people who just will not engage with your brand. So what you're trying to do is strip out those that you just feel or you just know that they're not going to be advocacy or advocates to your brand, or not going to buy your product, and then allows you to really hone in your marketing spend and activities on those that you think are target rich, that are bullseye for you and for your brand. So we call it pen profiling, where we bring a lot of this information together to really see how different ages, in this case, and generations separate from each other, but you and your own organization might create different personas and different pen profiles of things that are really important to you and your brand and the products and the category that you're in. So this just gives a summary of the different areas that Generation Z, what we call under-index. So 88 means that they significantly under-index. And then if I look at personality, fun to be around, when you see 160, it means they significantly over-index. So if you think of the index or the average is 100, then anything over 100, as I said already, they're way over average. Close to 100, they're just a little bit close to average. And if it's under 100, you mean they significantly under-index. So if I drop down to hobbies, you'll see reading at 76, sport at 71. So they engage in these hobbies a lot less than the average of all adults as part of this study. Generation Y, there you'll see, and you'll be able to look at these in more detail yourselves if you want the slides. So I'm not going to go through them in great detail because I want to, before we run out of time, share with you some case studies, what it looks like in particularly a brand context. So here we are, Generation Z, and just for completeness, we've included boomers. And you'll see, if I look at shopping habits, for example, you'll see a lot of areas where they under-index. If you look at lifestyles, you see areas where they over-index. Listening to the news, for example, every day, 122%, looking their best, 131. So again, some areas where they significantly over-index. But just to share with you some case studies, some examples. This is the first one, is one we did for Royal Caribbean, where we looked at a different set of attributes. So it's all about hobbies, interests in cruising, visiting different destinations. So this is what it looked like in terms of just one of the sample slides, where we ended up creating a cluster, 3 cohorts of those that are high frequency travelers, medium frequency travelers, and low frequency travelers are those that take a lot of holidays, take a lot of different trips, take a lot of different holidays through the year. And then we can see the average number of holidays they take. And then we do what I mentioned already, this idea of indexing, where we see here high frequency travelers significantly over-index on the bottom left, and you'll see the low frequency travelers significantly over-index on smaller trips. So again, not terribly rocket science there, but it just gives the example of what a real client-side project might look like. That was then used to create 4 different pen profiles or personas. And you will see this in any brand or any organization that has done this. We would always recommend giving your personas a name. In this instance, this was really looking at not just, Mary, it was some name or some adverb together. This is really trying to understand the type and the personality traits coming out of those particular cohorts, of those personas. And any of you have an interest in cruising, you might know that, and there's an old adage that, a lot of older people cruise a lot, and that's a lifestyle issue. It's a money issue. But one of the areas that we uncovered as part of the persona development for Royal Caribbean is discerning young parents. And you'll see this if you look at any Royal Caribbean ads over the last year or two. It's all about fun. It's all about family engagement. It's all about different activities for all ages. And the whole cruising model is changing away from those older age groups. The phrase that is common in the cruising industry is newlywed or nearly dead, in terms of the more traditional holiday makers who would use cruises a lot. And really the whole persona development in the case of Royal Caribbean was uncovering a new market that currently don't engage a lot with cruising, but again, depending if there's enough activities, enough fun things to do with the family, it becomes a hugely interesting and new holiday destination for this particular age group. Another one we did was Sky customers, where we looked at what we call their high value customers. So what do these high value customers have in common? What do they look like? what brings them together. In this instance, we looked at things like loyalty, we looked at things like how they engage with communications, we looked at interest in online activities like broadband, and we also looked at how they engage with content and TV content and so on. And that allowed us to develop a number of pen profiles highlighting different types of Sky customers. And then finally, and again, apologies, I think the quality of the last couple of slides aren't great. This is one we did for e-bookers. And what you see here is, if you look at the top of the screen, this is where we actually brought in real transactional data as well as demographic data. So again, we got under the covers of those in terms of profiling not just their interests or their hobbies, but also their spend profile. What are they spending on holidays? What are their household income? What are their attitudes to smart devices and technology? How they engage with loyalty and rewards? So any brand can really decide what's important to them when it comes to developing a pen profile. What joins these group of people together to really target a campaign, or create that persona that might represent only 20% of the adult population, but that persona is exactly the type of person you want to sell to. It's exactly the type of person you want as a customer. And that's what segmentation and persona development do, is highlight that group of people. It could be 20%, 60%, whatever, but they're the people that you should be targeting your marketing campaigns, your marketing spend on, to maximize return on your investment for such spend. So just to finish up, so as I said already, segmentation allows you to target the clusters that will deliver the best opportunities for growth to your brand. It could be increased loyalty or increased customer satisfaction. It could be reduced switching. It could be, footfall through a store. It could be higher sales. So it's really understanding which interests and hobbies and habits are important on top of demographic data. So each brand will have a different set of these variables that are important to understand and to capture. And then in our case, we run significant amounts of cluster analysis to really uncover and connect people together that have these shared common traits or shared common variables together. What normally happens if you were to do something like this is the data will create 5 or 6 groups or cohorts. So your 100% of population will be broken down into smaller groups of people, which then become personas and then developed to be pen profiles. And then normally each brand will decide which of those 5 or 6 groups are the ones that need to be prioritized when it comes to a particular marketing or customer support activity. So they're the ones that are most important to engage with. Others might be ignored because they just won't ever engage with the brand. Others might not be a priority, that maybe they are engaged with, let's say, below the line activities, and other groups are engaged with above the line activities. So it just allows you to have a more educated, a more defined approach in dealing with different groups, rather than trying to engage with everyone in exactly the same way. And what we say to all our clients, and hopefully you see that with the Royal Caribbean example, is everything feeds from that. Our customers that really do segmentation well, is the personas become the language in the organization. So they talk about, in the case of Royal Caribbean, their language in marketing is a wealthy striver, for example. They don't talk about males or empty nesters, 65 plus retired. They talk about wealthy strivers. That becomes the language in the organization that underpins all their activities across brand, marketing, sales and strategy, and so on. And then finally, those that do it well, then the personas then become part of the CRM platform. So what we do with our clients is we then connect the personas to internal data. It could be loyalty card data. It could be transaction data. So then even the CRM platforms, the internal systems and databases also talk about personas, also talk in the language of wealthy strivers or wide-eyed wonders, and not, again, frequent shoppers that, visit 3 times a year or whatever. So it really is a different way of really thinking about how to engage with smaller groups of customers and how to become more impactful with those particular customers as well. So apologies, I'm a couple of minutes over. If you want to chat, if you click on the chat button, you should be able to ask me a question. I'll hang on for a couple of minutes. Just so you know, as I'm sure Ryan has already shared with you, the presentation will be available in a day or two. The recording will be available in a day or two, so you'll be able to have a look at it in more in leisure, or have a run through it again. But as I said, let me know if you have any questions before we go. So we have one in terms of what are the applications of segmentation. So as I said, it really varies from each individual organization in terms of how you look at your customer base. So it could be as much as deciding where you spend, where your marketing spend goes to. So one of the big challenges we see with marketing, even with advertising, is really who are we talking to, and do we understand them well enough? Are we throwing money at a message that actually is being heard, but by the wrong people, by people that aren't actually right for our brand, or really aren't the people we're trying to engage? So I think that's really brings a little bit more science, a little bit more targeting, and it brings a lot more intelligence to how you engage, and how you might engage with smaller groups of people that are more impactful. And again, will generate better return on your investment, because you're getting the right message to the right people in the right way. Another question on where do you start? It's a good question. These are fairly bigger projects, but again, normally we would always say start with your customers, understand your customers better in terms of what is it about them that connect them with your brand, or keeps them engaged or loyal to your brand. So do persona development of people in your customer base already. And what we've done with Royal Caribbean, another good example, is we use learnings from our customer base to try and target campaigns to prospects. So really understanding how the customers engage, and then using that, almost replicating that, to create campaigns that engage with prospects, where we've also done some persona development. So we're developing personas of people who aren't in the customer base, but we're taking learnings from our customers to really identify people who are like-minded, who may not engage with the brand before. So there's plenty to do, but start with what you have and what's accessible, and normally that's within the customer base itself, and maybe doing a survey of your customers, or looking at your CRM data and engaging with those as well. So I think that's the last question so far. So let's leave it at that. Thank you everyone for your time. I hope you found it useful. The webinar will be available in a day or two, and or if you need it sooner, maybe drop a note to Ryan. And thank you all for your time. I hope you found it useful and informative.